The shape we're creating today is an asymmetrical graduated bob with an asymmetrical fringe. So I'm starting in the back. I have slightly diagonal forward sections from the crest of the occipital to the top of each ear, and I'm using diagonal back subsections. I'm utilizing my razor and a vertical skimming technique. I refer to it as vertical skimming because you're working from the top to the bottom, from the top of the section down to the bottom of the section. One of the important things to think about with this approach is when you're working graduation, most of the time is really the angle of your fingers, because if you're not careful, the angle of your fingers could mimic the shape of the head, where the occipital bone tucks down into the nape. If your fingers mimic that head shape, then you're actually going to create layering and a removal of weight as opposed to that buildup of weight that we're looking for. So really making sure that you're working shorter at the top of your section, working down shorter towards the bottom of your section, really tucking that in. You see how tight my fingers are into towards against the neck. I'm going to continue diagonal back subsections all the way until I get to the hairline on the opposing side that I started. And then we're going to work diagonal back sections in the other direction. Once I finish this with my first section on this side, I'm just going to quickly check for balance just to make sure I'm not shorter or longer from the jump. But checking for balance is important at this point. I'm utilizing a traveling guide with my subsections. So, and one of the things I really love about this approach to graduation is because you're going diagonal back sections one way and then diagonal back sections the opposing way, the haircut really filters itself, it cross checks and filters itself out all at the same time as you're building up your shape. So it's a really great technique. I find it takes a little getting used to, but once you get the hang of it, I think it's a very simple, foolproof approach to a great graduation. So working up the head, continuing with slightly diagonal forward sections, and I've switched over to a horizontal or surface skimming, and I'm utilizing the guide from underneath behind the ear where I've already approached my graduation. I'm using a guide from underneath more or less to measure, I measure the length of my stroke in my skimming technique. So I am skimming equal distance above and below my guide just to get a nice weight removal, texture, and to create a really soft line. I'm not trying to create a perfect line right now because a blunt line, because I'm actually going to go back with my scissors and really define that line. Using a pen cutting technique just in the front of the ear and around where I feel like I need a little bit more weight removal. Pen cutting in reference to the way you're holding your blade. Great technique for a really soft, consistent weight removal. Using my scissors to define that line in front of the ear, I released a little tension over the ear. Working back to the other side, I'm again continuing with my horizontal skimming. Again, utilizing a guide from underneath. Having a little bit longer stroke. Again, it's going to give me a little more weight removal. And at this point, once I get to behind the ear, this is where my asymmetry starts. So the asymmetry comes from starts at behind the ear, and it's really just the angle at which you cut that line, which I'm going to do with my scissors. But right now, just removing a lot of weight that's the heavier side of my asymmetry. So I'm doing a much longer skim to really release that weight and create a nice seamlessness. A little added weight removal with some pen cutting. And at this point here, I'm just defining that line. Make sure I'm scooping my guide from underneath so I can clearly see it, and just easily refining my line. So here's where the angle of my fingers and the angle at which I cut really is where that asymmetry comes from. So I'm just working shorter to longer to a pre-existing length. That was from a pre-existing haircut. I'm just working to that longest piece. You really start to see the shape coming to life, and it's a really soft buildup of weight. So working through the top, I've established a side parting, and through the top on this one side, I'm using curve cutting very lightly Curve cutting is very similar to pen cutting in the sense that you're holding your blade in the same direction, in the same way. The only difference is the slight crescent moon shape that you're carving into the hair. So with pen cutting, it's a straight up and down motion. With curve cutting, it's more about opening up spaces. So using curve cutting, open up some spaces through that lighter side of my established side part, refining my line a little bit there with my scissors, and then I'm going to work on the heavier side. And the heavier side, I can get a little more aggressive with my curve cutting because it is the heavier side, so I really want to open up some spaces. And I'm using both sides of the blade, changing directions of that crescent moon shape. Now I'm just refining my line once I finished with that. When I feel like I've opened up enough space and released enough weight in the interior. Adding that top section into my line. And then from here, I'm going to establish my asymmetrical fringe. So this is always, of course, a really fun part, really artistic part to what we do. I'm going to be freehanding the foundation of this fringe. So taking a diagonal forward section from that side parting, and I don't need this to be perfect because I'm going to refine it once I blow dry it and I've neutralized all the root direction. It's laying it natural fall. So really just freehanding that line in there, using a combination of straight cutting, a little bit of point cutting there. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect at this point, but you do want to take into consideration how long, whenever you cut a wet fringe, you want to think about shrinkage, that spring factor. So not going too short in the beginning. So I'm using a flat wrap technique, flat wrap drying technique, and this is what I refer to as hard wrap, which is you're playing follow the leader. You're using the concentration nozzle on your blow dryer, and it's following directly behind your tool. Here I'm using a flat brush. I did 100% of flat wrapping with this on this shape. I use a combination of the flat brush as well as the comb, the fine tooth part of the heat resistant comb. And what I'm looking for, most importantly with this, again, is neutralizing root direction and creating a nice, sleek, smooth finish. And I'll talk about how I prepared that fabric, because that is important whenever you're choosing the right liquid tools to prep the fabric to get the job done right. So going back again, now I'm going to really kind of fine tune my fringe. Again, using a combination of point cutting, freehanding, using my comb a little bit just to hold the hair in place. I'm not using tension. But again, really important here is to neutralize root direction so the hair is laying at natural fall. Doing some point cutting and deeper point cutting, actually elevating as I do a deep point cut to really soften that fringe, remove a little bit more weight in it, so it's just going to really collapse there. It's not going to bevel out. So I'm using some slide cutting. This is a great technique just to connect the fringe on that lighter side, as well as open up the face just a little bit more. You get a lot of freehand work in this haircut, which is always a lot of fun. And that's really the creative artistic side to one of the creative artistic sides of what we do. Again, here in the nape area, also love, one of my favorite parts, freehanding. And, really, this is where you really train your eye to get a sense of there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's all about, do you want a square? Do you want a triangular? Do you want a V shape, a U shape, rounded? There's no right or wrong. It's what's pleasing to the eye and what's really going to best show off that haircut. So here's the finished result of my haircut. And again, just to talk about, as we go work into the styling, talking about the prepping of that fabric, what you didn't see is I used Sebastian Gel Forte, and I cocktailed it with Sebastian Dark Oil. And the Gel Forte really gave me a nice bit of flexible hold and grip, and it's going to add with added tension to really get a nice smooth finish. And of course, that dark oil is going to give me that shine, that smoothness without weighing the hair down or feeling greasy or oily. And that's really what that prepping that fabric is what allows me to really just kind of I'm softly just fingertips pinching and pulling and allowing that hair to be weightless, and just pinching my fingers together, rubbing together, creating a little bit of friction, That's all I need to do, and the fabric is prepped, and it makes my job very, very easy. Create a nice softness, nice little editorial style. And of course, there's always one last thing to do is kick her out.